Hi everyone, I'm Nicolas Batista, a student journalist and interviewer for Vivace Allegro, and today I'm interviewing two guests who are part of one of the most quietly influential but powerful stories in modern music history. First one being Richard Anthony Hewson, the legendary composer, arranger, and musician who is behind hits such as Clouds Across the Moon, Are You Satisfied, Messages from the Stars. And you probably have heard it. Went viral on TikTok years ago with viral edits, viral clips from TV shows like The Boys. And this song has found a new life on the internet, has found a new home, and has even been performed at Coachella as of late. And Richard Hewson was the orchestral arranger for many famous artists that I'm sure you all know. The Beatles, Art Garfunkel, Diana Ross, Supertramp, and even Fleetwood Mac. He was actually the one who's behind the orchestral arrangement on songs like The Long and Winding Road and I Me Mine. They're hauntingly beautiful, and hence the reason why. And that's not the only person we're joined by. We're also joined by Dan Hewson, his son, who is currently the leader of the new incarnation of the RAH band, starting back in 2022, where they played their first live show at the Jazz Cafe, and now are currently still playing shows and are going to be having a future performance at Bush Hall. And Dan has merits of his own. He is great. He's played with some great artists, has great stories to share, and he's a part of the Curve Ensemble. And before I begin this interview, I want to give my sincere thank you to Will McCormack, who helped make this possible. He handles the PR of the RAW band, and he was extremely hospitable to me. He helped bring this to fruition. And without people like him, conversations like this would simply not exist. He's really helping facilitate the preserving of the legacy and the rich history that these legendary bands like the RAW band have. And so I just want to say thank you again, Will. And I hope you're all looking forward to this interview just as much as I am. So I wanted to ask you, has it been surreal for you watching a song from the early 80s just become a part of internet culture decades later, all of a sudden?
Yes, indeed it has. I mean, obviously, as you say, that song is about 40 years old. So I was back sort of but nearer to your age at that time when I was starting out. I'd been an arranger for a lot of other bands, or doing orchestral arrangings and backings. So I had a taste of the business. But then Messages from the Stars was one of the very first songs that I wrote and produced and played on in my own little home studio. It was, in fact, probably I did the very first one was called The Crunch, which was an instrumental. And I mean, the Messages from the Stars came a couple of years later. And that was only the second vocal song that I'd made. And it didn't do huge business back in the day. It was a hit, but a club hit. But it didn't cross over like it did like 2 or 3 years ago. And it seemed to have started in Los Angeles, some strange reason, because I mean, we were never even heard of, I shouldn't think, before this practically. I don't know. Was a RAW band even known before Messages from the Stars?
That's really interesting. And do you think that we're mentioning, I guess, like the contrast between what it was perceived as back then and now? Do you think that younger audiences connect with the song differently than how audiences originally connected with it back in the 80s?
I think I don't know. Everybody's got theories of why songs take off long after they were born, but I think it's something to do with, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to denigrate the music of today, but most people are using the same gear to make their songs, and so everything's coming out pretty much sounding the same. And kids today, because I've got children and grandchildren that I hear what they're listening to, and it all sounds to me quite similar. Now, back in the day, when Messages the Stars was made, it was all done by hand. No sequencers, no any electronic uh, things to correct things. Everything was played physically. And I think that may be what gives the 80s sound its character. The point was it was all made by hand.
Right on. And this thing you're saying about like this 80s sound and the authenticity of it, is that something that you're really enjoying seeing like brought to modern audiences and modern spaces? I noticed like for example, Will and you guys have been posting about how your song was recently performed at Coachella by Holy Brune. And is that
Yeah.
something that excites you like for the future of music?
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, anybody who likes the music is a friend of mine, sort of thing. Naturally, it's very flattering that they've picked it up and had a good lot of success with that tune. And hopefully, it'll spread out to get people more interested in other raw band tunes because there's a lot out there. 40 years of working on it. I've got quite a few tunes there in the background waiting to come out for another next few years.
Well, it's exciting. And I actually have a question for Dan. So, what's it been like for you personally, like watching younger generations rediscovering your father's music?
It's incredible. Um, it's amazing. I mean, of course, as I was growing up, as a child, a young kid just getting into music myself, I was growing up listening to him making all that music, and obviously now I've gone off and had a music career of my own. But yeah, as you said, to see a younger generation coming through, and we've done live gigs with the RAH band recently, and there's a young 20 something audience, and there's people in the front right up by the stage, and they're singing the lyrics. They know all the words. And it absolutely blows my mind. I mean, it's incredible that, something that I knew as a kid from such a long time, well, whatever, 30, 40 years ago. And now a completely different generation that weren't even born, they've come to this music, and they're talking about it as their favorite song. And yeah, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. I agree. Good.
No, it truly is, yeah. And I mean, this is an open question to any of you. So, as beautiful as it is seeing Messages from the Stars specifically becoming so iconic now, are there any other like raw band works that you all personally wish that modern listeners would discover more deeply?
Well, there are, as I say, there's a mountain of material there, and it's quite a broad spectrum actually. From the other one that was the one that gave us the breakthrough in Europe and over here was Clouds Across the Moon, which was my take on a sort of a space odyssey, if you like, a conversation between a wife and his husband who's on Mars. But that song was massive over here, but never got through into America. I don't know why, but maybe with the Artemis spaceship recently, it might sort of ring a few bells. But yes, there's that, and there are other tunes like Sam the Samba Man, which is a very popular raw band tune in Europe as well. But over your side of the Atlantic, Messages from the Stars is the only one that I know that people know about. But maybe Messages might spread the message, as it were, and open people's ears to other material in the catalogue.
Fun. And I mean, it's funny you mention Clouds Across the Moon because I am originally from Brazil.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
When I was
Sam
about
the Samba Man.
Yeah, exactly. I was telling Will, like between that and Falcon, those are my favorite raw band songs. And so it's funny you mentioned Clouds Across the Moon because I was talking to a few older members of my family, and he actually heard your song all the time in Brazil in clubs and on the radio all the time.
Wow.
But Clouds Across the Moon, all across the board, everyone's like, I love that song growing up. And so that was
Yeah,
exciting
yeah,
to see.
yeah, I agree. In fact, looking at the statistics, it did very well in Brazil. Apparently, I think it was used on a soap opera or something or other. I can't remember exactly the context, but it was very big in Brazil, which was quite surprising to me because I love Brazilian music. But I wouldn't have called "Clouds Across the Moon" a Brazilian type song, but it did have a quite an effect in your country.
Yes, it
It's
did.
really interesting to hear this actually about where this stuff is and kind of because we don't know all this information, so it's really interesting to hear this from you, Nicholas, as well. It's really
Mm.
good to get the outside of somebody that's the other side of the world, effectively. Because that's what we need. We need to know more about this all the time, so we can do more about it. It's really important.
Yeah, okay, I agree.
Yeah, and Will,
Nicholas, did you come across a song called "Rock Me Down to Rio"?
yes,
Oh yes, another Brazilian attempt.
I love Rock Me Down to Rio. It's amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yes, that's nice. I didn't realize that you had got as far as where you are. But no, I mean, obviously, being a Brazilian music fan, I did two or three things, or more than two or three things with Brazilian tinges, and that originate from, well, my take on Brazil, really. I actually did go to Rio before I did any music at all. I was a merchant navy cadet, only because somebody left his guitar behind on one of the trips I was doing, that I took up music. So if he hadn't led that guitar, I would never have got there. But I did go to Brazil, to Rio, on one of the old tramp ships that I was on, and it was fabulous. I really enjoyed it. But that's my only connection with Brazil, really.
That's great. Like that's I was gonna ask a lot about that because I was really hoping that there was something there because you have at least two songs in your discography explicitly about Brazil, and that's something I find really exciting to see that people love our culture, you know. And I love Brazilian music too, but what are some Brazilian artists that like either like inspired you or you just really loved listening to all the time?
Fan of Ivan Lins. Ivan
Oh,
Lins.
Ivan Lins, yes, he's a great pianist and singer too. Yeah, I love his tunes. But back in the day, it was Astrid Gilberto and, of course, Jean Gilberto and Jobim, all those guys from the 80s and 70s and 80s. They were the ones that influenced me, you know, coming on as a young guy and coming away from having been to Brazil and got a bit of a taste of it. I really connected with the music.
And
Can I put two names into the ring?
yes, you can.
Milton Nascimento and Hermeto Pascoal for me.
Oh,
Yeah,
good job.
Two of my favorites.
I mean, I personally also like Elis Regina and
Okay, I'm going to make a claim to fame now, Nicholas. I did a gig in Rock in Rio with her daughter,
really.
with Rita Maria,
Wow.
Maria Rita. Sorry.
Damn, that's incredible. Wow.
Yeah,
When
yeah, I didn't know that, Dan.
we performed in Encontros and Despedidos, which is the song of Nascimento. Yeah, with her, with the
Oh,
daughter of
right.
Ellis.
I
Wow.
didn't know that, Dan.
There you go.
Bring that one away.
Claim to
I didn't
fame.
know that either. I thought I knew everything about the RAH band and the wider RAH band,
There
but
you
that's
go.
another new one. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's really
Yeah, good. Excellent.
You also mentioned the Merchant Navy, and so I kind of wanted to, I guess, now ask some questions about all the years you spent at sea. Is that, like, I guess, the definitive thing that shaped the atmosphere, the emotional distance, and all the feelings that people feel in your music?
No, well, obviously, as I said, coming out of the Merchant Navy without a note of music in my head at all, so I was quite late and quite grown up by the time I really got into music, and then I started and became a total jazz head. I was jazz. Or Miles Davis was God for me and things like that, and I just did nothing but jazz until one day somebody offered me a job. Offered me a job as an arranger. So I thought, right, blimey, I've got to go to college to get some knowledge about how to write scores, which I did. And I came out, and the first job I got as an arranger, not as a player or anything, was arranging for Paul McCartney, the Mary Hopkin record. Those were the days, which was the first job for a young guy like me, went to #1 right around the world, which, of course, opened the door to doing lots of different arrangements for lots of different artists, which gave me the experience I suppose I didn't have beforehand to get into the pop music and doing my own projects and producing. So really, it was a lucky break, two lucky breaks: the getting of the guitar on the ship, and then meeting Paul McCartney and him giving me my first job.
Yeah, wow. And do you still talk to Paul today? Or
No, I'd love to, but he's such a busy man, isn't he? He's a brilliant guy, I have to say. He's about the same age as me now, and he still does shows 3 hours long and remembers every note of his songs. I don't know how he does it. He's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I can't remember a lot of the stuff I did 20 years ago, but his memory is amazing.
Yeah.
And he's such a nice guy too. He's not, he's very, very not, I wouldn't call him humble, but he's just very down to earth. A nice guy.
I mean, obviously, before the RAH band existed, you're already like a big part of music history because you arranged and orchestrated for the Beatles, Diana Ross, Carly Simon, Art Garfunkel, Supertramp, and many, many others. But what fascinates me most is that you did those massive like orchestral sessions, and then you became one of the earliest and like most successful bedroom producers decades before that even became a normal thing for musicians to do. Like that's the main method of music production nowadays in their bedrooms with laptops and home studios. Did that transition from arranging from these huge stars feel like natural to you from a creative perspective? Or did you feel like you're entering a completely different world and revolutionizing music?
Well, I have to say it was a commercial decision. I tell you why, because arrangers still don't get royalties. I mean, I know it's one of those old chestnuts that kick around. But arrangers get paid a fee for the job, and you don't get royalties like songwriters or producers. You get one fee. Now, back in the day, I think I probably got 25 quid for those were the days. Now, that would have been quite a lot of money in today's money, but I didn't get a single royalty. And I did a lot of arrangements for a lot of people who went on to make a lot of money out of me helping them along. Now, one day I suddenly thought, I've got to make my own music, otherwise I can't survive. I couldn't go on forever. So I know it sounds a bit mercenary, but it was the reason I had to do something about changing a direction. So this is when I started the bedroom band. I could play the guitar, I could play the bass, I could play the keyboard, and I didn't have any synthesizers at that time. A lot of people say the Crunch, which was the first RAH band record ever, sounds like it's got a synth on it, or two or three synths, but I didn't even own a synthesizer at that time. It was all played literally by hand. So I changed from being an arranger, but I didn't stop arranging. I kept doing arrangements for people, and quite often that stood me in good stead, because for records like Clouds Across the Moon, it's quite orchestral if you listen to it. So I could bring my arranging skills into play on my own records, which was a great thrill, to have a big orchestra helping you with your own music. It's a thrill, brilliant. That's how it came out.
Wow, yeah.
I think what if I may jump in, just one difference I notice is that, a lot of bands you talk about, I mean, let's say just the Beatles, for example, but many bands, it's all about, you got a group of four musicians or whatever, and they get together, they rehearse, they do gigs, then they go into recording studio, make an album. But with my dad, it was a very different thing. It was very much just him on his own. And so I think it just made sense. It was the logical thing that he had his studio in the house. And it was just all done from one room, because you didn't need to collaborate. You could do it all yourself, really.
Exactly so. And also, your mum, Dan's mum, my first wife, she she wasn't a singer. She was still is a very brilliant musician. She could read anything that you put in front of her. So when I came to doing vocals after doing an instrumental album, I thought I'll have to try and write a song, which I did, and I got Liz to come in, my first wife, to come in and sing it, because I knew she wasn't a singer, but she had a very good ear for music. So she just literally read what I'd written on the paper. And that came out to be Perfume Garden, which was the very first RAH band song. And yet, she wasn't a singer at all, but it had a quality of naivety, if you like, which started off the vocal side of the RAH band. And then, of course, putting orchestras on top. As Dan said, I could do it all myself without any outside influences. I used other musicians for instance, when I did the jazz funk album RAH, I used two great musicians, sadly not with us anymore, but Ray Worley, the sax player, and Barry D'Souza, a great drummer, played on all the songs on that, or instrumentals on those tracks. And so I did take my homemade tracks that I'd done in my bedroom to other studios to put on strings or sax and drums, etc. So it wasn't completely me, but the basis of all the tracks was basically in the home studio.
And he would quite literally I would help him. He would pick up his 8-track tape machine, and
Yeah,
we'd put it in the back of your car.
yeah,
He'd shut the car, and you'd drive up to London, do your recording, and then you'd bring the tape machine back home, and we'd
yeah,
put it back into your studio.
yeah.
And that's how you got all your brass and strings and drums and what have you onto your
Yeah,
tracks.
exactly so. Yeah, it was quite a way of working, not how I'd been used to with other, or how other people did it. They would book a studio, book musicians, and then do their track. But I used to do bits here, bits there, and then put them on in a studio, put all the other instruments I wanted on, and then bring it home and finish it off.
Yeah. And that's super fascinating because things like that, I mean, we mentioned it earlier, nowadays have become so much easier, but then there are also constants. You mentioned like the flat fee for arrangers, and that's still a thing today. Like artists having to fight for ownership and having to fight for their artistic identity, that's something that remains constant. While the actual like hard work and actual expre part of the expression, that just becomes easier and easier. But that's ultimately what made you one of the most important artists and musicians of your time. So that's great to hear. And question to Dan. So, Dan, knowing this, when you reinterpret this music now, do you try to preserve it exactly as it existed, or do you consciously allow your modern influences or your musical identity to bleed through into it?
That's a really interesting question, Nicholas. I think I come from the starting point of these are great records. The music is brilliant. So I think our approach with it has been generally well, how it started when we started doing the live gigs is that I started off by basically transcribing the records note for note and kind of mapping it onto the band that I knew was going to play it. But as we've gone on, as we've performed these over the last few years, the songs, what happens? I mean, you've got a bunch of musicians involved in this project, so they've all got their own personalities. So yeah, there is a natural development that's going on with these songs. I mean, if you listen to the live album we did, Touchdown, but curiously, that was only the first performance. So I mean, we've done quite a few shows since then, and what is going on now is yes, the songs are slightly they're starting to morph a little bit. They're taking on the personality of the musicians that are playing. They're starting to put their own parts down. So I think, we started from the point of view of let's do these great songs as they are, but they're just naturally developing through all the characters of the guys and girls who are performing them.
Yeah, that's quite right, Dan. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but you're right. You see, when I made all these tracks way back when, I didn't envisage any live performance at all. I mean, apart from maybe a Top of the Pops where we actually mimed to the track, so we didn't even play live on it. But now you say now we're going live, which has only been in the last 3 or 4 years, because previous to that we were never asked to go live. And then we got a call from the Jazz Cafe in London saying, thinking that it was a band and offering a gig. And suddenly I said, oh, we can't do that because it's only me and then other few musicians that I've added on. But Dan very cleverly jumped up and said, but wait a minute, Dad, I've got a lot of friends who could make up a band and we could do it live. And so that was the first time we did it live, I think 3 years ago now, is it, Dan? At the Jazz Cafe.
I think
Or
it's
was it
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
22, wasn't it? 22 was the Jazz Cafe.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 years ago. So that was the first actual live performance of the RAH band. And as Dan explained, it has taken on its own character because all the guys are so great and the girls are amazing. And they really have got into the music. So it's got its new character, if you like. I mean, when you hear they're not exactly the same as a record. So, I mean, people would say, oh, but it doesn't sound like a record. No, it sounds totally different, a different slant on it. The live side of it's brought a new, injected something new into the old material.
I think I noticed it so much last year in the gigs, especially at Liverpool. I think that it definitely took on a different direction.
Yeah.
Even if you look back at the footage, there were just different quirks that people are interpreting. As you say, everyone's an individual, bringing their own persona. But I definitely noticed it mostly at Liverpool, probably in London as well at Metronome, but more so at Liverpool. You can see there's a gradual, it's just kind of characteristics coming in, isn't it? Like you say.
Yeah, I think we'd kind of proved in the first gig or the first couple of gigs that we could honor the songs. We could do the songs as they were and recreate them. And then I think the risk taking started, and especially I think you're actually right in Liverpool. There were a couple of different musicians on that, and there was some solo sections that just came from nowhere. We didn't even know they were going to happen. It was completely spontaneous on stage. It just went into this whole new section. So
I think
yeah.
Are You Satisfied was the one that really knocked me for six. With Jean-Luc on the guitar, he just went off on tangent. It was amazing. And I managed to capture it. I was right at the front, as what I'm with my phone, and I captured it. And I couldn't believe it. I kept watching it the next day, thinking, "Have I just seen that?" It was incredible, brilliant, just brilliant.
Yeah, it has taken the project, to a new direction, which is great. I mean, it's giving it a new lease of life in a way, even though I'm not stopping making records. I don't do so many as I used to. But this has certainly injected a new phase, if you like, of the project, where the people are taking the old songs and reinterpreting them in a live situation. And I think that's very healthy.
And that's awesome to hear because I personally have just been obsessing over the live recordings. I've been seeing them on YouTube, been listening on Spotify, and like Dan, you're knocking that out of the park. It's truly an honor to
Thank you.
Dad's legacy. And I just wanted to know more, like what emotions did you both feel hearing those songs that were kind of mythological in a sense because they hadn't been performed live, suddenly become like real in front of that audience? What were your first thoughts?
Hmm. Go for it.
Well, I mean, it was Nicholas. It was an incredibly emotional moment, I have to say. Because obviously these songs have been in my, these songs have been very much inside me since I was 8 years old. These really there's this music that I literally grew up with. So, and then all of a sudden to see, a band that a band I'd picked out of my crew, the guys I've been working with over the years, and to see them kind of commit uh, to interpreting, my family's music. It was a real feeling of kind of togetherness and just a real feeling of achievement. Yeah, it was extremely powerful, and it continues to be. Thankfully, and I hope we never would get to the stage where it becomes kind of parochial and just, oh, here's another gig. Every time we play, it feels, it's hairs on the back of the neck kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been on a couple of the gigs with Dan. Just pressing the samples or something very simple, not getting very involved in the playing side of it. And all the guys and girls were very, very flattering to me, flattering me by saying, "We just love playing this music. I love it. It's a really nice music to play." And that's a big compliment coming from such great musicians as the band and Dan are. I'm not. I wouldn't call myself a practical musician because I make my music bit by bit, if you like, in the home studio. So Dan's guys and girls really, when they say they really enjoy playing it, it's a great compliment for me.
And Richard, actually, listening to those songs back, like Dan playing your music, did that change the way that you understood the legacy of your older albums? Like, did it change your perspective on that?
I don't know, really. It's a funny old thing, music, isn't it? You go on for years and years and years, just waking up in the middle of the night, thinking of a tune, and then you come downstairs and you think, "What was I thinking? That's awful." Um, it is. It's as I say, it's a funny old game. I've got to do it. I can't help it. But some days I wake up and I think that was awful, what I did. And then the next day you might write something and think, "Oh well, that's not too bad actually." So it changes all the time. I think every day is a different day. Every day is a new tune. Some work, some don't. Mostly don't, but the ones that do are a great thrill, and that's what makes life worthwhile.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I wanted to know, Dan, because I know like one of the challenges about starting up the band back in the 80s was that, of course, like all the songs have like, really heavy production and are just they're very difficult to recreate in a live setting like authentically. But like, what do you think was your biggest challenge in translating the layered studio production
Mm.
into something performable in a live setting?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think that these songs, as my dad made them, they're records. They are a record of the time. They were, as you say, they were completely polished and produced and a final moment. It was a challenge. I think, well, I knew some things that I wanted to have in the band. I knew that I wanted to be a real drummer. I knew I wanted it to be a bass player, and I knew I wanted to have a guitarist in there. I mean, obviously, a lot of these records are primarily synth led. You've got multiple synth layers. You've got quite often the bass itself is played on a synth, and obviously the drums are very often a electronic drum kit, programmed drums. But I think we knew from the start that we had to bring it into a kind of live band setting where you've got a bass player and a drummer. Because I knew from experience doing gigs, it's when you get that kind of thing going, that's when you really get the magic on the stage. I didn't want we made a decision very early. We didn't want to do it with backing tracks. I mean, actually, we had a lot of offers to do the band as a kind of stripped back, reduced version, using backing tracks, and we've always been very against that. So yeah, The first thing was to really, as I said, it was just a case of transcribing. I mean, I would write out the bass lines, write out the guitar groove, write out the synth parts, work out what are the synth sounds, how can we find those? Because we don't use the same synths as what my dad was using back in the day. So we're finding this a recreation, a similar sound. So there was a lot of that kind of research work. Um, I gave we gave the record, we gave the tracks to the guys and girls. So everyone did their own homework. They all listened to the tracks. I'd written out scores for everyone, vocal charts, drum parts, everything. All the charts were written out. But I think it was a combination of them, reading the charts and then but listening to the records. So the drummer, for example, he'd hear the record, he'd hear what the drums are doing, and then he'd do his own, and it was amazing, really, because he absolutely nailed the drum parts. But it's played on drum kit, it's not played on electronic drums, so it was the same, but yet it was different. If that
Yeah,
answers
and
your question.
it also is carrying on what the RAH band started as. As I said before, when I left the Merchant Navy, learnt the guitar, taught myself the guitar, went to college and learnt about arranging. I was a jazz head, basically, jazz, jazz, jazz. I was only interested in jazz, as I said before, Miles Davis and all that. They were my gods. And then I got into the pop music. But if you listen to any of the RAH band tunes, you can hear a jazz influence in there. The chord changes are very jazzy, basically. And I think the fact that now you're doing it live gives a more of a carries on the tradition, really, of the jazz feeling of the thing, because it's getting more loose, if you like, and you can interpret it more jazz. No, I think that's very healthy. I think it's opening up the doors to what started as basically a jazz project.
Well, you hear the jazz influence, but at the same time, it has a very distinct like production that jazz records don't necessarily have. And I mean, that's also something I wanted to ask you about. In interviews before, you mentioned the ways that you produce your music, like the equipment you use, like Roland JX3P and Hohner pianos, and among other things. What really inspired you, or how did you learn how to produce music using that kind of equipment? Because back then, there was no really tutorials, like any online forums or things that there are today. So, how did you self-teach?
Well, basically, as I said, I was self guitar taught. So I got, but just by listening to music. When I was in the Merchant Navy, I used to listen to the Voice of America, a radio station which broadcast from America, the Jazz Hour. So that's when I got into jazz, and that's my first experience of music was jazz. So I was always based in jazz, and then when I went to college, I got more into the classics and got the classical string side of things into my bag, so to speak. But basically, I think it was purely listening. These two things on either side of your head, they're really the most useful tools in the bag. Just listening to other material, as much classical music as I loved, and jazz, because I really got into the classical when I was at college. So yes, it's a question of experience of what you've heard and what you like and what you don't like, trying things out. But basically, yeah, it was just listening and learning.
Can I add something? I think one other point that maybe Nicholas was asking was about perhaps just point out the process of you in your studio in the early days, because I mean I saw this going on, and what I did see is a lot of it was experimentation, wasn't it? Like you'd take an electric piano and you'd put it through a guitar pedal and you'd
Yeah,
you'd just say, "Oh, I wonder what sound that makes." It was a lot
yeah,
of that. It was what does this do if I press this button or I put that
yeah.
through that? What does that sound like?
Yeah, basically, that's probably right, Dan. I think I was never satisfied with for some reason or other, the sound of the electric piano as it was. I thought, I want to improve that sound. How can I change it? How can I make it better or different anyway? Same with guitars. I used to like playing through a chorus pedal or a fuzz pedal or a something else pedal. Because as a jazz player, you play everything purely through the instrument as the instrument sounds. But I sometimes thought, well, that's okay. It sounds like a guitar, but I want to make it sound a bit different. So I would experiment, as you say, with putting it through different pedals. And in fact, that famous intro of The Crunch, which was the first RAH band record, everybody says to me, "What was that synthesizer you used on the Crunch?" I said, "Well, I didn't even have a synthesizer. What it was an electric piano put through a guitar pedal, and that's how you got that whandy 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 sound." And it was called the Crunch because it had that. But it was actually as clean as a piano, originally. And then I put it through these pedals and over recorded them and got the sound which I thought made change it and made it more interesting. Yeah, good point, Dan.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan, for adding that. That's great.
Right.
And I mean, to build off of that, besides self-experimentation, I think that's what led you to shape your definitive sound. But also, what kind of influences or like inspirations had it most impact on you at the time? You mentioned Stravinsky as an example, but I don't know if you meant that as like an arrangement kind of way, or you meant that just like in a discipline way. But also, was there just any like records that kind of like changed the way you thought about texture, about production, songwriting? Just a few shout outs, if you will.
Well, yeah, there were great songwriters around at the time. Even Burt Bacharach started back then, and I used to love all his material. Jimmy Webb and people like that. I used to like the guys who did something like slightly left field, maybe different. Like Burt Bacharach with his different time changes, things like that, or unusual chord progressions. Because it was the jazz in me that I was looking at. A lot of pop songs back in those days were probably just three chords, the straightforward three chord trick, which is okay. But I used to look for something else in the stuff I listened to. As I said, Miles Davis was my hero. Jim Hall was the best guitar player for me. As a jazz guitarist yourself, you might have heard of Jim Hall. He's not around anymore now. But he had a great sound in the way he played the guitar. It was different from everybody else's. I suppose I liked the unusual in instruments and ways of playing. Maybe that was it. I was looking for something slightly left field, not quite the run-of-the-mill stuff. I think that's probably what spurred me on.
To shoot that question off to Dan as well, you're also a member of the Curve Ensemble. And so having these major projects out there, what kind of influences keep shaping your sound to this day?
Wow.
That's
I
a
mean,
question.
probably, yeah, it's a question. Probably pretty similar to my dad. I mean, I'm quite eclectic in my taste of music. I mean, I grew up pretty much on a diet of classical music and jazz. And then obviously, Weather Report came along in my mind, and then I had a period I got heavily into dance music, electronic music. Um, but to answer your question about performance, I mean, it's interesting. It's a very it's a very unquantifiable thing. It's not very it's very hard to define. How you deliver a good performance. I think there's something very kind of yeah, I think I want to use the word energy. I mean, I think it's the energy you put into the performance. It doesn't matter what the context is, whether it is, as you say, the raw band live or any other groups that I work with, or me on my own at the piano. I just think it's really being honest with the music, really believing in the whatever the music is you're performing, really just 100% committing to it, believing it. Because I think that's something that audiences do pick up on, not just the notes you're playing, but the way you're playing them, and they pick up, I think, on the way you're feeling about the music you're playing. I don't know how, but people do get probably the look, the body language and the face, and if they see you smiling and you're loving it and you're moving, you know. So these are things I try and make sure that every time I do every time I perform live, I try and make sure I do that.
Yeah, I can dig that, as they say. It really is. You can tell when somebody's playing with their heart rather than just with their fingers. You have to love the music to make it sound great. You can play, you can get all the notes right and play them in the right order, as what's his name said,
Eric Morgan.
Eric Morgan. Yeah. But it's the heart that goes into the music that you play that makes all the difference between a great performance or just playing the notes. And I think you did right, Dan. Yeah, you got to feel it.
You're talking a lot about heart. Do you think that part of that heart also comes from like the formative experiences? You also had like the Richard Hewson Orchestra, and that kind of served as a formative period in your musical career. So could you tell us like a little bit about that experience and what that was like and how that shaped you today?
Yeah, well, that was pre-RAH band. It's just before I started the RAH band. What I was doing, as I said, told you before, I spent a long time doing arrangements for a lot of people, and I did a record for a band called The Jigsaw, which was a huge hit in most of the world. And I thought at the time, you know, this arranging, this music that I'm arranging, I've got a sort of I've got hard to describe really your feeling, but I've been to college, learned all about Stravinsky and Rachmaninoff and all the great artists that had been before, and thought, isn't it incredible how they write? I mean, how long does it take to write a piece of music? I mean, to write, you know, a piano concerto, I couldn't do it in less time than they probably take years to write a piece of music, and that's what changes your whole perception of listening to it. So I don't sort of call myself a musician anymore because I'm not a great player like Dan. He is a musician. He's a great player, no question about it. And when you see a string orchestra with all the girls and boys playing absolutely in unison, perfectly, because they are great players, and I'm not a great player, but what I am is a music producer, and I just do it step by step, I suppose, as we've already described how we take the instruments and manipulate them to make them. It's a different sort of technique, but I've got such great admiration for guys like Dan and all the girls who sing in the band, and their talent is extreme. It's brilliant how they can do this. It's a gift beyond what you can imagine to be able to do that. I know it's a lot of hard work to learn, but once you've got it, it is amazing. And that's where I differ from a practical musician. You know, my music, I take a long time to make a track. So I'll be twiddling with it for days and days. In fact, my wife gets fed up with me twiddling with it because I keep changing it. And I said, what about this then? She, oh, no, please don't change it anymore. But that's what you do when you're working slowly on something to get it as far as you can say perfect. It's never perfect. At the end of a track, you probably say, I could have made that better. But you have to stop somewhere. And that's what I do. I keep going until I can't go any further. But it's all part of the making of music, you know, different ways of making music, different styles of music. Oh, it's just a great world, isn't it? The world of music.
I actually want to know how that ties as well into the Beatles and Phil Spector story as well. How exactly did you feel like just coming into the studio, Phil Spector's there? I don't even think Paul McCartney was completely aware of like the arrangements that were being added. What were the thoughts going through your head when you were just arranging, and were you thinking back to your inspirations? Were you thinking about your own philosophy and like work ethic? What was that like?
Well, I mean, you touched on the Phil Spector story, which is a famous story now. How I was asked by Phil Spector, who was brought in by John Lennon, as a matter of fact. I'm sure you know the story, to clean up the Let It Be album. Now, I didn't know that Paul McCartney didn't know about this because John and he had split up more or less. So Lennon was doing this on his own back. And I was called in and I met Phil Spector. And he said, "Well, I want a big orchestra, because you know he's what they call him, Wall of Sound man, didn't they? The Wall of Sound." So I said, "Okay, well, what do you mean? 4 violins, 6 violins, cellos? No, 22 violins or something ridiculous." But I thought, "Oh well, this is going to be good fun. You know, I like a big orchestra to conduct. Makes me feel good." So it was done without Paul McCartney's permission, and then of course when he heard it he went mad because he only wanted it to be with the piano. So it turned out all right because it got to number 1 in America. So we had a laugh about it, he and I. Afterwards I just smiled at Paul and said, well, it did quite well, didn't it, Paul? And he laughed, and that was the end of it.
There's a difference between the George Martin kind of arrangements and yours. And yours just you contributed something extremely beautiful to those songs, really.
Yeah, I suppose as you say, George Martin, I love George. I really got on well with George, but to me, he was a little bit timid. If that's, I'm not putting him in doubt, I don't mean timid. I mean, laid back with his arrangements. He never liked to overdo it. I don't know why. Maybe that was just his style. But me, on the other hand, young guy, much younger than George at the time, I'm fighting for my place. But you must never overdo the arrangement because you don't want. You're not the lead artist. Paul McCartney was. So I had to go as far as I dare with an orchestra to achieve something which I felt that I was contributing something to the song. And that's the way I approached those things in those days. But once or twice, I sometimes overdid it. I remember Art Garfunkel telling me I did an album with him called Breakaway, and I did it. It wasn't George Martin produced. No, oh no, it was Richard Perry, no longer with us now. Anyway, he was producing, and I went in with my arrangements for Art Garfunkel, who was a lovely guy. And we played through this one song particularly with the strings, and he got to the end and he didn't look very happy. And I thought, oh, what's the matter? What's the matter? Don't you like it? He said, Richard, why do you have to play so many notes in the strings? You only need to have one note. And I said, no. But Richard Perry was very good. He came up and defended me. And he said, no, Art, Richard's right in this case. It sounds great with those strings. So I won. But, sometimes you can make a mistake and overdo it.
Wow.
But it's a really interesting point, though, isn't it? I mean, about, songs and song ownership and, who's written the song. Of course, the song is the key, especially in pop music. It's the song and the lyrics and all that. But I mean, the arrangement, the orchestration, these other parts that make up, and once that recording is finished, and that's what people hear, that's what people know. And they might remember parts that aren't actually the song. They're
Yeah.
exactly
Oh,
the
yeah.
parts that the arranger came up with. It all becomes one big thing,
Oh, yeah.
and
I
your
had
arrangement, it's integral to what is that piece of music.
Yeah, and over the years, that's caused a lot of problems. Some guys, I've never done it myself, but some arrangers have stood up and said, "But wait a minute, I wrote that bit. Now
Yeah.
I think I should get a royalty for that because the song it doesn't include that in the original song. I've written this bit that goes here or in the middle eight or whatever it was." And he said, "I thought the arranger probably says I wanted to get a royalty, but they don't give royalties for arrangers, and that is the rule."
It is great that the stars did align for you to participate in such fundamental works. And those are in addition to your own, which is even more legendary in its own right. And so I was just wondering if you also had any more stories working in the studio with legendary musicians. I'm extending that to Dan as well because from the looks of it, Dan has worked with really crazy artists too. So yeah.
Well, funnily enough, most of them seem okay. Once you get to know them, you get some that don't. I'll tell you what, who I did not get on with, Nick Drake. Have you heard of a guy called Nick Drake?
I have.
Well, have you heard of him? Well, he didn't get on with me, and I didn't get on with him. I didn't like him anyway, and I had to do some arrangements for his album. I don't know who had fixed it for me to do it, or whether it was, or how it happened. I went in there, and I'd done some arrangements. Pretty good, I thought. They were okay. And he hated it. Slammed the door, went out. What a load of shit. Oh, what a load of shit this is. And oh, sorry. Have I made a mistake? And I think he was probably the worst client I ever had. But mostly, I'm glad to say, I got away with murder a lot of times.
I had one quite funny story where I think it was the first tune I was playing on a gig, and I had rigged up, a double keyboard stand. So you had the keyboard on the bottom, which was set to some kind of a Hammond organ, and then you had the keyboard on the top. And we were just about to start the first tune, uh, and the keyboard stand collapsed. So the top keyboard fell on top of the bottom keyboard and pressed down all 88 keys of a kind of Hammond organ sound. So it
Oh
was the
my
most
God.
God Almighty that you would not
Yeah,
believe. And
incredible.
I really wished the earth had swallowed me up at that point. It was really,
Yeah,
really
yeah,
embarrassing.
yeah.
So yeah,
Amazing.
that was a horror story.
Yeah, it was. Well, there's a story again going back to the long and winding road story. Not only the Paul McCartney thing, but it was with Phil Spector. Now we got a big orchestra in to record it, as you know. It was in Abbey Road, and I conducted it, the arrangement through to Phil Spector. He was in the control room, but he was a bit frightening. I didn't like to go in there because he got all these tough henchmen with him, you know. And they did say he carried a gun. I don't know whether that's true, but I played the arrangement through, and he didn't say anything. Didn't say anything at all. He just said, "One more." Okay, so we did it again. At the end of the next take, it was one more. And it went on like that for 10 takes. And the musician said, "Look, Richard, we played it perfectly. We can't do any more." And we said, "Okay, guys, we'll just have to go." So we just left. And he never said anything. He never said anything. And I never heard any more, apart from the Paul McCartney incident, about it till the record came out. And I never heard from him again. So I don't know what he thought about it, but he just kept saying, "One more." That's all he seemed to know. Funny.
Well, thank you for sharing once again these like stories. I also wanted to know more about like why the mystery, right? Because there's like a mystery that the Raw band and you are kind of like shrouded in because of that naming ambiguity. What led you to go by the Raw band rather than present yourself as Richard Anthony Hewson and kind of put yourself out there?
I don't know. Obviously, the name came about from my initials, Richard Anthony Hewson, the RAH band. And that was somebody else's idea, actually. I think I was going to call it Heavy Water or something at first, before I got the name of it. And somebody said, "Oh, what's your initial?" And said, "Oh, it's RAH." Why? He said, "Well, RAH band." I think it was that Stanley Dorfman, who was a producer for Top of the Pops. Anyway, what is it now? It is what it is. It's had its 40 or 50 years life, and now growing into something else through Dan and his mates and girls and boys. It's making it grow, and it's almost like a living thing, you know, a creature that's grown up through the years and now going on into, well, long after I've gone, I hope.
To contextualize kind of why I ask as well, recently I did get the opportunity to speak to Pat Metheny, and he actually had a really interesting thing to say about that because Pat Metheny, although he presents himself using his name, you may notice that he never puts like his face on an album cover. He doesn't do that because he wants audiences to connect to the music and not worry about the person. And I feel like that's held true for you, but was that something that was intentional or?
Yeah, I don't know. It's well, I can see the theory behind that, not putting your name on the record, but I just like to get feedback. You know, it's nice. I mean, you can, feedback is so important to me. I don't know about everybody else, but when you get bad feedback, it kind of does weigh on your heart, and you think, "Oh dear, I did that wrong." But when you get good feedback, it spurs you on. It's like it's the food you need to eat, to grow, and to expand. I do. So I wouldn't want to not, I don't overplay my name or my personality. I just put the name on, and it's there. The RAH band has got a nice logo. And once you see the logo, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get music made from us, by us, or in the live case, you get the RAH band live. So, yeah, it's a tricky one, that really to say, but I like a bit of limelight, but I'm not a big showman. I'm certainly not a showman.
And I think that works out just perfectly because I mean, even now, like Dan can probably attest to this. There's just the music just has a timelessness to it already by itself, the production, the songwriting, but just the music being like shrouded away in that kind of like mystery of it being kind of like a band having this cosmic thing kind of keeps it really like interesting. That mystery, I think, keeps people hooked, makes the songs timeless, and they age gracefully in a way. And so I think it's really beautiful that that's how it came about, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's great. Yeah, it is. I mean, I think we've got a great cross section of music, really, starting right from the beginning in the Crunch, which was classed as glam rock, I suppose, through the jazz record. The first album was a jazz instrumental, the RAH record, and then on to the vocal section. But all the songs different. That's my computer going. That all the songs, I seem to get a different. What do we call it? Subject, a different style, if you almost a different style. Trying to keep the style same, but a lot of the songs are quite different in material, so you get a lot of different styles as well, I suppose. But all coming from the raw brain, as it were.
Going to the topic of timelessness and the style they were just talking about, how do you think that the vocalist, starting with Liz up until today, how do you think it's important to shaping the emotional identity of the RAH band? How did you express that through your songwriting? Did you adapt to that, or how was it?
I would say I do things in three orders, three steps rather. I first of all write a tune. I never write the vocals first. I always write the tune first. And when I get a tune that I really like, I start thinking about the vocal. And then not that I would class myself as a brilliant lyricist, but I can write music that you can sing. In other words, the lyrics I write try to emphasize the music so that they're singable. I do that. And then I find a person to sing it, sort of thing, like the very first one when I got Liz to sing it, even though she wasn't a singer. But sometimes they just happen to fall into my arms, as it were, not literally, but I mean, the one is a girl called Susanna, which sings a song called Nightlife, which actually Dan's, we just discovered a lovely remix that he's done of it. Anyway, she is a shepherd who was on this farm, working on the farm where I'm living. And she was walking along one day singing to her sheep, and I was walking my dog, and I heard it, and I said, "Oh, hey, that sounds really good. Would you like to come and do an audition?" And that's how I got a note. I've never gone out and tried to sell songs to artists. It's a pretty impossible job anyway. So I always either by accident get introduced to somebody, and not all of them I use, but Debbie Sharp is an American girl who it was introduced to me, and she's done some great songs for me. And another girl called Mandy, who's actually a local girl from the village, who is a great vocalist. So I've never tried to pitch songs to artists ever. I've always just written the song, and then somebody came along, and I thought that's the person to do this. And quite a lot of them worked. Some didn't work, of course, but that was basically how I do it. I've never tried to pitch a song to an artist. I'll tell you one story though, with a sad ending. I used to write many, many years ago with a very good lyric writer. He's still around, I think, called Gordon Gray. Anyway, we wrote a song called In the Year of April. Now, the publisher at that time, and my publisher, this would have been back in the 70s, the publisher was Alan Keen Music. And he went to Los Angeles and found Frank Sinatra and played Frank Sinatra the song. And Frank said, "Hey, I'm going to record this." Wow, I thought, this is it. And then he died.
Oh,
Unfortunately, Frank Sinatra died before he had time to record it. Otherwise, well, who knows? I don't know, but I'm not worried about that. I just like discovering singers and giving them an opportunity.
that's the way it is, and that's why the music's authentic, right? I think
Yeah.
that's just how it had to be. And I want to extend a question to Dan as well. Do you think vocalists, or like I guess like vocal tone, character, was that something you considered when like rebuilding the band? Because
Mm,
I noticed like the new vocals, they are like completely different from Liz's originals,
mm,
but they add a lot of like new character and like breathe new life.
yeah. Yeah, great question. I mean, obviously, this is my mum who's sung on the majority of the songs that we're recreating. So, you know, that was obviously it's a crazy starting point. Um, we'd made the decision that we wanted to use more than one vocalist. Because the practicalities, we wanted backing vocals, and then I thought, well, yeah, we all thought, divide the songs so you're having a variety of, so the three vocalists. In fact, four on the recording. On the very first gig, we had a guest vocalist as well, who was a singer who'd originally sung one of the songs. But the rest are completely new singers. They're three vocalists I've been working with over the years. And yeah, it was interesting because I think what we did is we had our list of songs, and then we had our three vocalists. And what we did is we kind of sat down and we thought, now which song fits best? And it kind of, it was never going to be the same. But what we tried to do was assign each song to one of the three singers that we thought were most suited. Sometimes they've swapped round. I think it's partly a case of trying to honor the quality of the vocal on the original recording. And sometimes it's about, hey, why don't we just let this singer bring their own whole new approach to the song? And I think that particularly happened with like Messages from the Stars. You see Lily, the way she sings that, I mean, it's completely different to the way my mum sang it. Um, she's a completely different approach. But what I like about it is that she's doing it her way, you know. So she's
Yeah,
adding to it, you know, she's brought her character onto it. So, you know, I think it's never going to be the same, and we wouldn't want it to be the same. It is
no,
changing.
no.
It's changing the way you experience the song, but I like it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier about how the whole thing is growing as it goes. You know, I mean, it's been going for 40 something years, and now it's growing and expanding with the advent of live vocals, live instruments, and everything. It is, and you wouldn't want to just try and copy the way all the records were done,
No,
literally copy. Be very
no,
close to it. I mean, with the transcriptions you do, you honor the notes, as it were, but the interpretation of what you write is down to the musicians and girls to bring their thing to it, which is great and good and healthy.
Well, I mean, going back to the, like you said, like you think that music is evolving, it's growing. I think in a similar way, your like songwriting, your production is also evolving, it's maturing. Like Life After Love, for example, your sound has matured a lot and has changed. And then there's also the whole thing about now the male vocalist that's a known and things like that. Like how do you think that your sound is different from how like you originally conceived like your music in the studio? Like
Well, that's actually exactly what I'm doing at the present moment. I'm going through some of the back catalogue and rebuilding. In fact, we've got a new album out called Life After Love Songs, which is a revisiting of some of the old tracks and a couple of new ones actually, and one with a male vocalist, which that's another story. We don't know where he is. He's disappeared. Anyway, the album is basically a relook at some of the old versions and updating them, bringing them back into the modern age, as it were, without changing them tremendously. But it is it's a thing I'm doing now, really looking, because there's a lot of material they've done over the years, and to be able to relook at it and say, well, how can I bring this more up to date? Do I need to bring it up to date, or what? So I'm very careful about whether I need to do it, because, as we said long earlier in this interview, that the reason kids like the 80s music is because it was made by hand and it's got a certain quality about it that today's music is all computerized and AI and goodness knows what. So they've got a sound, everybody seems to end up with the same sound. And I'm trying to go back, but keep the character of the handmade music, but bringing it into the modern age, maybe introducing a little more electronics, but that is the future for me.
what do you think we can expect for the future of the RAH band, both as like a live performing band for Dan and also for you? Like, what kind of like new music are you working on? Like, what do you see in the future? Like, I know like for Dan, you have like Bush Hall coming up, and then I mean Richard, like, what are you working on?
Yeah, well, exactly that, really. Funny enough, the most recent song I wrote was only few months ago, and it's on this new album, this Life After Love Songs album, which we're hopefully going to put it on vinyl very soon. And it's already on Spotify, but we're going to put it out on vinyl because I want to go back to the good old days. I used to love when, I know long ago, but when vinyl records came out, you had an album and you had a 45-degree 7-inch, single with two tracks on it, which promoted the album. I like that way of working, and I think that with this new album, we're going to have a go at that, producing an album with all the sleeve notes that you get, the artwork, and a 45 7-inch record to promote the album, because but still keep the character of the RAH band, but bringing it into the what are we 2026, but with the same feeling of the way the original music was conceived.
And I think live wise, I think we're just going to carry on the push. We're just going to carry on the push to get more gigs. We want to keep doing more gigs. I think 2027 is going to be more dates. UK, maybe Italy as well. We're looking at, um, and probably some new songs. I think each time we do these gigs, I think we're going to bring in some of the other material. So, for the people that are coming to our gigs regularly, we're keeping it fresh. going to introduce some. I mean, as you say, there's so much back catalogue, but you know, who knows? 2027 might see another RAH band, a bunch of new songs coming out. What do you think, Dad?
What were you
Maybe
saying about new material?
some new
Somewhere
inspiration,
else?
maybe. What do you think for
What?
2027? Maybe some new songs?
No, well, I'll go writing songs, but I didn't hear anything. What did you say about new material, other songs from other people? I didn't
Not
hear
from
that.
other people. No, not from other people. Only from you.
No.
Only from you.
Yeah, of course I will, but I'm slowing down now a bit, obviously.
Yeah.
But the most recent one, obviously, is only 2 or 3 months old. So yeah, it'll go on. Maybe a bit slower pace, but it'll be over to you to expand the project.
But we definitely want the live shows to reflect the new material.
Yeah.
And we want to keep mixing it up in terms of the rep, so that you know, we never want to go into a kind of formula thing with our gigs.
One thing I would like to do one of these years probably is to take something like the Albert Hall and a big string orchestra with, you know, symphony orchestra, and do the RAH band songs with an elaborate orchestra around them, because a lot of them got quite big sounds, even though it's only maybe synth strings or whatever. But to do a concert, you know, a concert performance of very good.
That does make me think, actually, because I mean, I know we're wrapping up, but that does make me think, because my activities with the Curve Ensemble, who are an amazing string ensemble, and I think it could be an amazing hookup to expand that to become essentially an orchestra. Put it together with the RAH band live, and I think that's a brilliant idea. Do a big show in a big venue with strings, and maybe even do some of your best arrangements as well. You know, bring them back to life again. We haven't heard those live ever. You know, I think that could be something pretty special to hear your string arrangements performed live for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You've got a big transcribing job on your hands there.
Yeah. Don't worry, we've got AI. AI will do that for us now. AI will do the magic.
Yeah, great. Anyway,
I can't help but feel envious, but like for the folks in the UK who get to experience it live, right? Maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll fly out. Maybe
you have to come over, Nicolas. Come on.
I'll have to come over.
Yeah.
Come down.
I was going to say, you're going to come over.
You have to come over now.
Or we need to come. Or we need to come to America and do a show there. I think that's the answer.
Well, no, but I'm looking forward to it. And I mean, just like some final thoughts now. Is there anything, like, either of you, or even Will, is there anything anybody like wanted to say, that something that you probably haven't like put out before, or just like what are your like closing thoughts now that we've reflected about like legacy and performance and everything?
No, just to say, I'm loving the journey. Absolutely loving it. It's such a joy to be doing this and to keep this whole thing going, keep this whole show on the road. And also, it's been absolutely great chatting to you, Nicolas. And you know, you're a fascinating guy, and you had some brilliant questions there. So I've really enjoyed this little chat we've been having.
No, I was just going to say, I echo exactly what Dan said. It's a great interview you've done there, Nicolas. Brilliant. And we look forward maybe to seeing how you get on next, and what are you going to do next in your life.
That was a great chat. Thank you. It was so good to have this chat.
Thank you again. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Really nice.
Nice to meet
you. See you soon. Take care. All the best.
Okay, guys. All the best, everyone.
So much.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.